MadBhagavad Gita, Chapter-2, Sankhya Yoga, the eternal reality of the soul's immortality. Verse 1. Sanjaya said, Lord Krishna thus spoke these words unto grief-stricken Arjuna, whose saddened eyes were brimming with tears, being overwhelmed by compassion. Lord Krishna said, O Arjuna, from where has this illusion of yours appeared in this moment of crisis? This is not befitting honorable men, nor conducive to the attainment of heavenly spheres, and is the cause of infamy. O Arjuna, do not yield to unmanliness. This is not worthy of you. O chastiser of enemies, giving up this base weakness of heart, rise up. Arjuna said, O Krishna, how can I counterattack with arrows in battle Bhishma and Drona, who are worthy of respect, O annihilator of enemies? It is better to live in this world by begging, without slaying our great and elevated superiors. Otherwise, by slaying our superiors, the wealth and pleasurable things we are bound to enjoy will be tainted with blood. We do not know what is better for us, whether we conquer them or they conquer us. Those sons of Dhritarashtra, whom by slaying we would not desire to live, are gathered before us. 7. Now my natural qualities are besieged by weakness and apprehension, and my thinking bewildered regarding righteousness. I am asking you to please state what is definitely good for me. I am your disciple, surrendered to you. Kindly instruct me. Even after obtaining a prosperous and unrivaled kingdom on the earth, and supremacy of even the demigods, I do not see that which can dispel this grief of mine, draining my senses. 9. Sanjaya said, having addressed Lord Krishna thus, Arjuna, that chastiser of enemies, said, I shall not fight, O Krishna, and became silent. 10. O Dhritarashtra, thereafter, situated between the armies, Lord Krishna, as if smiling, spoke these words unto the grieving Arjuna. Lord Krishna said, You are mourning for those not worthy of sorrow, yet speaking like one knowledgeable. The learned neither laments for the dead or the living. Verse 12. Certainly never at any time did I not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, and certainly never shall we cease to exist in the future. Verse 13. Just as in the physical body of the embodied being is the process of childhood, youth, and old age, similarly, by the transmigration from one body to another, the wise are never deluded. O Arjuna, only the interaction of the senses and sense objects give cold, heat, pleasure, and pain. These things are temporary, appearing and disappearing. Therefore, try to tolerate them. O noblest of men, that person of wise judgment, equiposed in happiness and distress, whom cannot be stirred by these, is certainly eligible for liberation. 16. In the unreal there is no duration, and in the real there is no cessation. Indeed, the conclusion between both the two has been analyzed by knowers. Verse 17. But know that by whom this entire body is pervaded is indestructible. No one is able to cause the destruction of the imperishable soul. The embodied soul is eternal in existence, indestructible and infinite. Only the material body is factually perishable. Therefore, fight. Verse 19. Anyone who thinks the soul is the slayer, and anyone who thinks the soul is slain, both of them are in ignorance. The soul never slays, nor is slain. The soul never takes birth and never dies at any time, nor does it come into being again when the body is created. The soul is birthless, eternal, imperishable, and timeless, and is never destroyed when the body is destroyed. O Arjuna, one who knows the soul as eternal, unborn, undeteriorating, and indestructible, how does that person cause death to anyone? And whom does he slay? 22. Just as a man giving up old worn-out garments accepts other new apparel, in the same way the embodied soul giving up old and worn-out bodies, verily accepts. Verse 23. Weapons cannot harm the soul, fire cannot burn the soul, water cannot wet, and air cannot dry up. Verse 24. The soul is indestructible, the soul is incombustible, insoluble, and unwitherable. The soul is eternal, all-pervading, unmodifiable, immovable, and primordial. Verse 25. It is declared that the soul is imperceptible, the soul is inconceivable, the soul is immutable. Therefore, understanding the soul as such, it is improper for you to lament. O mighty armed one, even if you think the soul always takes birth, or is always subject to death, even then you should not lament. For one who has taken birth, death is certain, and for one who is dead, birth is certain. Therefore you ought not to lament for an inevitable situation. O Arjuna, of created beings before birth is unknown, between birth and death is known, and after death is again unknown. Therefore, what is the cause for lamentation? Some see the soul as amazing, and others describe the soul as amazing. Similarly, others also hear of the soul as amazing, and some, even after having heard, still have no knowledge of it. O Arjuna, this eternal soul within the body of every living entity is immortal. Therefore you should not lament for any. Verse 31. Moreover, considering your righteousness, you should not falter. Indeed, for upholders of justice, there does not exist a more appropriate endeavor than a battle for righteousness. O Arjuna, happy are the upholders of justice, who achieve a battle of this kind presented by its own accord, and which is a wide-open path to the heavenly planets. However, if you do not engage in this war of righteousness, then abandoning your natural spiritual duty and reputation, you will incur sinful reactions. 34. Also, all people will speak of your infamy for all time, and for respected persons, infamy is worse than 35. Death. The mighty chariot warriors will consider that you retired from the battlefield out of fear, and for those whom you have been held in great esteem, you will fall into disgrace. Your enemies will speak many malicious and insulting words, discrediting your prowess. Alas, what could be more pitiful than that? Either being slain you will attain the heavenly worlds, or by gaining victory you will enjoy the earth. Therefore, O Arjuna, confident of success, rise up. Verse 38. Being equipoised in happiness and unhappiness, profit and loss, victory and defeat, thereafter prepare for battle, and in this way you will not incur. Verse 39. O Arjuna, I explained to you this spiritual intelligence regarding the nature of the soul. Now listen to this science of actions, without fruit of desires, by which spiritual intelligence is endowed completely, releasing you from the bondage of reactions from action. Verse 40. In this yoga, there is no loss in any endeavor. There is no diminution of result, and even the slightest effort performed righteously saves one from the greatest. Verse 41. In this yoga, O Arjuna, spiritual intelligence is firmly resolved and exclusive. But the intellect of those full of material desires, indeed, has unlimited. Verse 42 and 43. O Arjuna, men of limited understanding presume speculative interpretations of the Vedic scriptures, advocating that there is no divine principle in creation. Full of lascivious desires, aiming to attain the lush heavenly worlds, they glorify only the statements of the Vedas, which are pleasing to the senses, performing numerous ostentatious rituals productive of good birth, wealth, and power, ensuring sense enjoyment and worldly pleasures. Their resolve, deluded by contemplating sense enjoyments and worldly pleasures by such ideas, does not attain the spiritual intelligence to concentrate their minds on the Supreme Lord. 45. O Arjuna, the Vedic scriptures deal with the subjects in the three modes of the material nature. Become self-realized, transcendent to the three modes, in pure spiritual consciousness, free from duality, and free from conceptions of acquisition and preservation. Verse 46. All that is served in a well of water is better served by a vast lake. Similarly, all the purposes in all Vedic scriptures are realized to he who knows the ultimate. Verse 47. You certainly have the right for prescribed activities, but never at any time in their results. You should never be motivated by the results of the actions, nor should there be any attachment in not doing your prescribed. Verse 48. O Arjuna, establish in the science of yoga in actions, perform your activities giving up attachment, and become equipoised in both success and failure. This equanimity is known as the science of uniting the individual consciousness with the ultimate. Verse 49. O Arjuna, by spiritual intelligence, discard fruitive actions, which certainly are abominable, and aspire for the refuge of the science of uniting the individual consciousness with the ultimate consciousness by this spiritual intelligence. Those impelled by fruitive results are wretched. Verse 50. One endowed with spiritual intelligence can get rid of both positive and negative reactions in this very life. Therefore be diligent in the science of uniting the individual consciousness with the ultimate consciousness. In all activities, the science of uniting the individual consciousness with the ultimate consciousness is superlative. Verse 51. Endowed with spiritual intelligence, wise men, giving up the results arising from actions, certainly liberate themselves from the bondage of birth and death, attaining the state of complete tranquility. When your spiritual intelligence overcomes this myriad of delusion, at that time you will become indifferent towards all that has been heard and all that is to be heard. Verse 53. When your spiritual intelligence, unaffected and uninfluenced by karmic interpretations of the Vedas, remains steady, at that time you will achieve the pure spiritual state by the science of uniting the individual consciousness with the ultimate. Verse 54. Arjuna said, O Krishna, what are the signs of one properly situated in perfect knowledge, of one absorbed in pure spiritual consciousness? How does one steadfast in this consciousness talk? How does he sit? Verse 55. How does he walk? Lord Krishna said, O Arjuna, when giving up all desires for sense gratification produced within the mind, and becoming satisfied by the realization of the self in the pure state of the soul, then it is said one is properly situated in perfect knowledge. One whose mind is undisturbed by distress, without desires for happiness, free from attachment, fear, and anger, that stage is known as steadfast in consciousness. One who without attachment in every respect neither rejoices nor curses, obtaining correspondingly good or evil, he is established in perfect knowledge. Verse 58. When one completely withdraws the senses, similarly as the tortoise withdraws its limbs from the objects of the senses, he is established in perfect knowledge. As embodied beings, by restricting the senses, may refrain from the objects of sense enjoyment, but the taste for enjoyment remains. However, even this desire for sense enjoyment ceases for one realizing the ultimate. Verse 60. O Arjuna, the senses are so turbulent, they can forcibly lead astray the mind of even a vigilant person of sound judgment. Verse 61. Keeping under control all the senses, the self-controlled should meditate on me, since for one whose senses have been brought under control is established in perfect 62. Knowledge. While concentrating on objects of the senses, a person develops attachment to the sense objects. From attachment, desires are born. From desire, anger arises. Verse 63. From anger, delusion occurs. From delusion, bewilderment of memory. After forgetfulness of memory, the loss of spiritual intelligence. And losing spiritual intelligence, verse one 64. Perishes. But that self-controlled being who follows the Vedic injunctions, while amidst objects of the senses, freed from attachment and aversion, with senses governed by the self, attains the precious mercy of the ultimate personality. when one attains the precious mercy of the ultimate personality, certainly the end of all miseries occurs, and very soon this happy-minded person has his spiritual intelligence fully established. Verse 66. One with an uncontrolled mind cannot have spiritual intelligence. One devoid of spiritual intelligence never meditates on the ultimate truth. And for one who never meditates on the ultimate truth, there is no peace. And for one destitute of peace, where is their happiness? Verse 67. Whichever among the various senses the wandering mind becomes engrossed in, that sense certainly leads astray his intelligence, like the wind snatches away a boat on the water. Verse 68. Therefore one whom has his senses subdued fully from the objects of the senses, O mighty armed Arjuna, is established in perfect knowledge. Verse 69. What is night for all living entities, then the self-controlled is wakeful, and that in which all living beings are awake, that is night for the introspective sage. Verse 70. That sage achieves peace, whom approaching all kinds of enjoyable sense objects remains unaffected, like unto the ocean, being always filled by approaching rivers, and not that person desirous of sense enjoyment. Verse 71. That person attains peace, who giving up all material desires for sense gratification, lives free from attachment, free from false ego, and sense of Verse 72. O Arjuna, having gained the realization of the ultimate truth, one is never again deluded, and even at the moment of death, being situated in this state, liberation from the material existence and attainment of the ultimate consciousness is assured. Thus ends the Sri Bhagavad Gita Trust translation of Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Chapter 2, entitled Sankhya Yoga, the eternal reality of the soul's immortality.